Welcome to the Audiobook Lovin Podcast, discussing all things audiobooks with the authors that write the stories and the narrators that perform them. Brought to you by Viviana, Enchantress of Books.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 15 of the Audiobook Lovin Podcast. And today, my guest is narrator Michael Gallagher. Welcome to the Audiobook Lovin Podcast. Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm amazing. As I had just mentioned, this is my first podcast ever.
I know.
I'm joining the 21st century, finally. And as I had said, I'm tickled pink, honestly. So thank you for having me.
No, I'm excited. I always love being someone's first. It's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Said presidents and all that fun stuff. But I promise I'll be good and gentle.
Thank you. I was thinking to myself, like, oh, maybe I should have brought a drink in, relax even more.
Totally up to you. We can pause for a minute if you want to go grab one.
No, it's good. It's good.
Okay, good.
I'm ready.
It's 5 o'clock
this will be
somewhere.
like the hot seat. It'll be good.
Yeah. Well, it's not so. Again, you'll see that. And we can make sure later that do the check-in. I'm like, so hey, well, how was your first time?
Yeah.
But why don't we start with having you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been narrating, and how you became a narrator.
Sure. So let's see if I can condense this just a little bit. Because it is a tale. But yeah, no, I come from an acting background originally. I've been acting pretty much all my life. I went to school for acting in North Carolina, and it really wasn't until the tail end of it that a buddy of mine was switching jobs, and he wanted to use me as the talent in it. And so I did that, and he got the job. And he says, well, he goes out to Austin, Texas is where this job is. And he says, I know you can't really like fly out to Austin, but it would be really great to get you to do something. So I'm going to see if I can find you a job. I was like, no worries. Live your best life. So about 3 months later, he calls me and is like, well, what, could you try some voiceover? And I had never done voiceover at that point. So this is about, I want to say 2016. So I guess about 6 years ago, right?
You're okay.
So yeah, ballpark. And so he was like, okay, remember that camera setup that I, told you to get? Cause I wanted to make like short films and stuff at the time. And I was like, yeah. He said, remember that boom mic that I had you get? I was like, yeah. He said, okay, here's what you do. And I did my first sort of closet setup. I created something of a tent of a down comforter, and I did all the things that you sort of put around to make everything proofed, soundproofed and everything. And I did the job and I send it in, get paid, and I was like, where was this the whole time? Because I had just spent 4 years in acting school, and nobody talks about voiceover, period. And I have some suspicions about why that is. I think a lot of it has to do with most teachers don't really have a ton of experience with it. So they tend to, most of the, I guess, curriculum really sticks to the mainstays, stage, film, television, and things relating to that. But voiceover is really something where, a lot of advancements only came around in the last 20 or even 10 years. To make it such that that's something that was democratized and made much easier for other people to get involved in independently, right? So basically, I was just shocked that I was like, well, this is a really viable sphere in which acting can exist that could make for a great career. And I just thought it was so much fun, and really sort of a kind of like a very efficient and economical way of doing acting, because unlike being in a town like right now, I'm in LA. I've lived in LA for the last about 4 years now, almost 5 actually. And I thought to myself, as opposed to huffing the pavement, going to an audition that could take you like half a day or a day, you got one shot to do the audition. And then maybe you get it, maybe you don't. Whereas in voiceover, as a voice teacher told me, you get to, that's why they call it voiceover. You get to do it over
and over and over again
and over and over. Right. And so that's why I was like, oh, and you can do like 50, 100 auditions, however many that you can do, that you can stomach. And I just thought, wow, this is remarkable. So I was doing sort of my own thing for a while, doing a lot of online research and learning a lot about what it is that it takes to, be a voice actor and all the things that you have to learn about, tech wise, technique wise, all these different areas. And at some point I realized that it is distinct from other kinds of acting in that you really don't come into contact with other people a whole lot because most of it is on your own, right? And so I was like, I really feel like I need to find my tribe. I really need to feel like I need to find people who I can talk to about this, sort of look to your left, look to your right and say, is this working? And so basically I did just that. There's a group in Burbank, not far from where I live, where it's called Voices Anonymous, and they meet up every month. And it's a bunch of voice actors that, like to shoot the breeze and talk about what's going on and what they're doing and everything. And that's where I eventually, when I went for the first time, I met my mentor, Byron Wagner, who is incredible. And you should probably very seriously consider bringing him on the show because he has a ton to say and he taught me just about everything I know.
Okay.
And so he really helped me learn so much specifically about audiobooks. So the person who had introduced me is like, you do audiobooks, right? I was like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah. Sort of like faking it till you make it. I was like, wow. I also didn't even think about that either. And so Byron was the first one to really sort of introduce me to the world of voiceover, and all that it entails. And so I've been doing my first audiobook was in 2019. I think it was around July or so of 2019. And I've been doing it ever since. And it has been just an amazing experience. I mean, I get to tell people that I tell stories for a living,
Yeah.
It's as an old acting teacher told me, good work if you can get it.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned it in the sense of like, no, because it's like, I really wish that when I was in high school, they would have said to you, as a career, you have voiceover and voice dubbing, and graphic design work and things like that. Because no, instead I was teacher and psychologist, and I'm going, I would have gone into graphic artwork, and I'm like, wait, I can take photos of hot guys and do book covers.
Yeah.
But they don't do that now, and I think now it's becoming a little bit more like conversations are opening up to non-traditional careers in academia. And but thank you, Brian, for getting you into all this.
Yeah, no, Byron's been great. He's really been just a wealth of information. He also, his whole thing is like, he has had like a whole litany of careers that have informed, not just his ability to tell a story, but like to really sort of connect with a whole different kind of, various different kinds of people, and to sort of, he loves to matchmake. So he loves to like, get people together and see if something fun can be done. So yeah, very charming guy.
That's awesome. You have to look into him. But you run the gamut. You have things from like middle grade to young adult to hot steamy romance. I mean, how did that come about as far as the different genres and narrating within them?
That's a great question. So originally when I was thinking about how I wanted to position myself in the world of audiobooks, I was thinking, well, what kinds of books, number one, would I enjoy, but what kind of books would I do? I think that I would be pretty good at. And, I think I kept getting this feedback where a lot of people, and this was also sort of in other voiceover realms, a lot of people were pointing out that I had this younger sounding voice for a male. I didn't sound particularly, authoritative, but I did sound, sort of like I had like a kind of a young, maybe charming, or at least something that would be believable in the high school or college realm. And I was like, that makes sense, right? And so I thought that, I wanted to start by aiming at young adult, which, was pretty great. So Byron kind of, introduced me to Deb Dion over at Dion Audio, and we really hit it off. And so that was sort of my first relationship with a production company, in which I could sort of explore that a little bit more, particularly the young adult stuff. And that was going really well. So like you noticed, there's, a handful of different things that I've done over the years with them. I have this great series called Skyborn that I've been doing, which they do with Scholastic Audio. There's the Diary of an 8-Bit Warrior series, which has been a long series that I've done with them. Sort of all these things that fit somewhere between young adult and middle grade. And then right as Pink Flamingo Productions was starting up, I signed up for their roster, and I really thought that I wasn't right for romance. I thought because of my younger sounding voice, I didn't sound, to put it one way, I didn't sound like the 6 foot tall guy with the 6-inch dick that, you really seem to hear a lot more of in romance, the very sort of the deeper, steamier, voices that's where it sits with them most naturally. And I just wasn't sure if I would be believable, in romance but honestly, it just went to show me that I didn't know much about the varying tastes and, hopes of the listenership in romance, and how diverse it is in terms of what they're looking for, And I think maybe there was sort of this intersection between, at first anyway, the sort of the high school, I should say late high school romances, and young adult romances that sort of intersected with the romance world that started out at first. And then ever since then, I've been doing all kinds of romances, primarily, I would say the majority of what I do at this point. Yeah. So that's been extraordinary.
Yeah, it's interesting how a lot of the guys tend to think that we want that deeper, growly, come here, finish her kind of a thing. And I'm like, most guys I know don't sound like that. And
right. Well, yeah.
And it's what you're saying, not so much. And also then that there's those different tones and ranges within your own voice that you can come out and you're going, oh yeah, whatever you want. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I also, I get it, because it's like, it really, it sort of, it just depends. I mean, obviously, I can dip down into my deeper register and stuff and, sound like a mafia don and, do whatever it is that I need to do, which I have a lot of fun doing. But I also realize that you just can't really predict what it is that's going to resonate with people and what isn't, and it's it really does manifest in the, when you go to audition for these books and stuff that you're really not sure that you may even be right for. And then you get the book because the author really seemed to have a lot of faith in you. And in the casting decision that their listeners are going to enjoy this person, working with this character. And I guess all I can say to that is I'm deeply grateful to be a part of all this, something that I didn't think I was going to be as welcomed into as I suppose things that seemed more obvious at the time,
Well, now you're here and we're keeping you, so you're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that the gamut of romance, the genres that kind of we have, everything from that right now very popular dark bully, late high schooler, new adult, early college,
Yeah.
and then the whole billionaires and people that have 15,000 helicopters. And I'm like, I did not ever have a guy in my college years that I worked for as an internship look like that or be a billionaire. But hey, it's fantasy. But the romance community is a great community that we definitely fall for, the narrators and the authors and the stories that you guys are telling us. So thank you for being part of that.
I love it. I love them. They've been they've been the most responsive. I guess the romance audience, they really are great fans, and they're really wonderful people. And I'm going to my first I guess convention. Have you heard about the Allure romance audiobook convention?
You and I are gonna have to go get coffee or something or a drink.
Oh, good.
Because I'll be there.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I'm thrilled. This has been a thing that's been in the works for, I want to say better part of 2 years now.
Yeah.
And it's finally coming together, and I'm thrilled. For a little while, I wasn't really sure, if I was going to be able to make it, but I did as of a couple months ago. And I'm so excited to finally meet like all my co-narrators and Sarah and, and all the authors, these are all people that I've emailed with and everything, but just haven't had the chance to meet and to get to meet all the fans that, I don't even know what to expect in many regards. So I'm super excited.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So for those that are listening and may not have heard, Allure is an upcoming convention that is specifically for audiobooks. So they're having authors that are attending are only those that have audiobooks out in production. And they're trying to pair up those authors with their narrators. So, when you go get a book signed, you can get both the author and the narrator to sign it. And so, you're going to run the gamut of people asking you to sign books. They're going to sign, some of them may have even do scrapbooks with book covers instead of the actual physical book. And there's, pillows, and you might get a penis pillow here and there. Who knows? So, I've seen a lot.
It's funny because I've never done these kinds of things. I don't know what to expect in terms of reactions and people, how excited they'll be. I also don't know. Something struck me is I have several authors who are going to be doing book signings at the convention. And so I'm thinking to myself, because what they try to do is they try to pair you up with them at a table so that you can do book signings. And I said, they were like, well, which, who is it that, you want to be seated next to? And I was like, well,
all of them.
Oh, now I got right. All of them, except I guess you can't do that. I don't know how this works. So I'm sort of wondering, if you have multiple authors who are doing signings, do you bounce from table to table and try to sign for people? What do you do? If they're trying to do it with your book, I'm not even sure how that works. So I'm curious to see what they do.
It would be interesting. I know that there's been times where in previous years prior to this whole thing called COVID and conventions would occur, there were sometimes authors that have done books together, but their last names, because things were alphabetized by last names, are completely opposite. So the individual would have to go from one table to find the next and things like that. But I'm sure there's creative ways, and you and I off air I can give you some ideas and suggestions on how to connect with those authors, because you don't want to leave anybody out.
Right. Well, that's what I'm nervous about. I was I don't want to make anybody feel like I'm not that, I didn't choose you,
You will never narrate one of them. I'm just kidding.
You'll never work in this book town again.
Yeah. I no longer love you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. So I just want to be everybody's friend.
Yeah. Well, you'll definitely have opportunities and, to meet up with everybody there and both listeners and authors and also peers. It's when it comes down to those book signings, there's even times off Like
Mhm.
it used to be where we would go, the book lovers, it was the book lovers RT convention. And that it happened years ago. I think it's been now about 3 years that it's no longer in play.
Mhm.
Owner sold it. But we would actually, the bar would be another place where we would get
Yeah.
together with the authors and we're like, oh my God, here's a beer, sign my book.
Yeah.
Or if you brought their entire collection, you don't want to bring that entire collection to the place when, 5 books is the required minimum. So you would try to get together with them. So there's definitely lots of options and opportunities for that. So like I said, we'll get together off air, but I'm excited you're going.
I'm psyched. I'm so psyched. It's funny you mentioned the authors because like that's another thing that I'm almost like I'm a little nervous about because I don't really know a lot of them by face, right?
Uh-huh.
And in some cases, I might even not recognize them by name because a lot of them do go by a nom de plume, a name that they otherwise is not their real name.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know whether or not they're going to be walking around with like their pen name on their name tags. So I hope I don't. I hope I don't, mistake anybody or just totally not recognize them for one reason or another. If you're listening, authors and narrators and stuff that I haven't actually met in person, I'm so excited to see you. Just tap me on the shoulder and let me know because I might not recognize you at first.
It is a fear of mine to accidentally out someone because a lot of individuals, both authors and narrators, use the pseudonyms. And it's always like, so usually the way that I kind of function is if I met you as Michael Gallagher, and let's just say that was your pen name, that is what I'm calling you for the rest of your life. Even if you bust out with, no, really, my name is John. I'm like, listen, Michael, I have 2 narrators that I've worked with in my entire now, like almost 10 years. And they're the only ones. And that's because they got on my ass about calling them by their real names. And I'm like, okay, sir, I'm not arguing with you, sir.
Right. No, that's a great point. That's a great point. For my part, I actually thought about this in the beginning. I was like, well, do I want some kind of a pseudonym or do I, and I don't know. I've seen different arguments for things. Like, for instance, I remember Jeff Kafer talking about how sort of the reason why he did it was to kind of keep brands separate. So like he feels like his sci-fi, and I don't want to butcher what he meant, but I guessed that based on what he was talking about, he wanted to keep his audiences that might have different interests separate. So like his sci-fi audience might not necessarily want to see the stuff that has to do with their romance audience and stuff like that. So he uses different pseudonyms for that. Although, it's been years since I heard him say that, so I don't know if he holds the same thing to be true. Whereas, I've heard from other people, and I kind of feel the same way. I'm not personally really all that concerned about anything that I do. And I kind of feel like I want to keep it all under one umbrella, I would like to be associated with pretty much all the work that I do. And that's not to say that you're saying that you don't want to be associated with the work you do, but I know that some people get nervous about, I don't know, some people getting concerned about when they do things like erotica and stuff. Well, I've never had that concern, really.
Yeah, I just think it's it definitely is a per individual and whatever they feel works best for them. It can get kind of messy too when you start going into different genres, and all of a sudden you have 4 different pen names to try to remember, and you're going, Google Gmails is going to be my pain. But I think it's been interesting in romance where we devour the books and we want to know, well, what else are you doing? And it doesn't matter if it's underwater basket weaving or sci-fi or historical. We want to hear it because we like the sound of your voice and how you perform the books. And granted, it's going to be a difference if it's autobiography, memoirs, cookbook, absolutely, sci-fi, things like that versus anything else. If kind of fill in the blanks. I know sometimes the other aspect is some of the narrators that do middle grade children's young adult books, like, Diary of an 8-Bit Warrior. And if, you have your son that busts out with, hey, mom, I want to, and then he's like, yeah, use my iPad. And then as he's scrolling, he's going, oh, Diary of an 8-Bit Warrior, Beyond Vengeance, Burn to Ash. And you're going, oh, no, honey. But on the opposite spectrum, I have friends that have kids and they love your performance. And they're like, I really wish that he did children's books because it's great. So yeah, it's the gamut.
Yeah, it's funny. I had that exact same thought too. Like, oh, is it because they're going on Amazon and they see all these things? And I asked, his name escapes me. But I asked a producer one time, what it is that he thought of that, quote unquote problem, like whether, are you concerned about, people when they look up, and a narrator on Amazon, if do the production companies or the publishers ever get concerned about, their listeners running into content that they didn't really want to see? Like, for instance, if they're looking for the young adult stuff or the middle grade stuff, but they really ended up running into also the erotica stuff. And the producer basically said, we're really not concerned about that, because for the most part, they're really just looking up either the genre or the book, right? Or like the series or something. They're not, and it's sort of like, he meant this as no offense, but he's like, it's not, unless you're a diehard audiobook fan, which there are many, right? They are legion. But for the most part, a lot of people just look up what they want to hear, and sometimes not necessarily like who they want to hear. And so they feel like it's probably more okay than most people make it out to be.
Oh, yeah.
And they've never had an issue where they've had, no one's ever had to like apologize because one of their narrators did both erotica and middle grade, fiction. I've also even occasionally done books for, it's not Christian audio, but it's the offshoot of that. The same people who made it. I think it's called One Audio. I've done a few books for them, and you'd think maybe those would be one of the few companies that might be concerned about me doing erotica as well. Never heard a thing. I just don't think it's something that most people are really concerned about.
Yeah. I think it depends. It's such, individual, whether it's for work or family. I mean, sometimes personally, people may not want to know that they're doing the hot steamy stuff, because their mom might be searching for an audiobook.
Yeah. Oh, mom, it seems we have the same favorite narrator. Which what are the things do you listen to?
No. Yeah. But I mean, it's a good conversation, but that's also where I always say to people, at the end of the day, regardless of the why, we just have to respect their wishes and call them with what they tell us to call them by. So.
Yeah. And of course, to all my narrator friends who do have pseudonyms, I completely respect that decision, because there's probably far more reasons that somebody has a pseudonym that I didn't think of or I don't know about.
Oh yeah. Exactly.
So yeah. No, I'm sure, that there's very good reasons, and a lot of them have fun with their pseudonyms too.
Oh yeah. That is true. Yeah. I will say it'd be kind of fun to be like, fuck it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
more power to them.
Yeah. And besides, between now and in the future, you might decide to do a pseudonym. You never know, right? Who knows?
Maybe.
Yeah. So we'll figure it out. Yeah. And then we'll have listeners like, okay, he kind of sounds familiar, because that's the game that we play afterwards when we're trying to figure out what you guys, if it's the same one, and we're going, play one sample, play the other sample, play one sample, play the other sample. Viviana. I'm like, I'm not telling you.
I got you. I won't out you, but I got you.
Yeah, exactly. So is there a difference in prepping a book for audio when it's like the 8-bit versus a full-blown adult romance for you?
Yeah, another good question. I would say, with a lot of the young adults and middle grade books, you have to think a little bit more dynamically about the voices that you want to use. I do find that, a lot of those audiences do respond to, if you can work in any sort of almost cartoon or a character, exaggerated character like voices, then that can be a lot of fun and a lot of, it just can be very exciting to sort of stretch those muscles as well. Diary of an 8-Bit Warrior in particular was one where I have a file in here somewhere where I keep like a whole array of examples of the characters. I think there has to be at least somewhere between 30 and 50 characters or something.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I'm so grateful too when I'm like on book 6 and I'm like, oh, this is a character that I saw in book 2. I have to go back and check to see what that was again. And there is, some people are just so prolific in their ability to be super dynamic. And I think I pride myself in my ability to be fairly flexible. But some of them are going to have some overlapping characteristics. Just because, as someone once told me, it's an audiobook, not a radio show, so you are one person after all.
Yeah.
Some things, not every single one of the characters in a, book where it's like 50 characters is going to be entirely original or unique, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's definitely one of them. I do find that those books where a lot of times you're doing characters that are roughly the same age range, as the audience. And for me, it's gotten a little bit more challenging to sort of squeak out the younger voices over the years. When I started out, it was a little bit easier, but my voice has been sort of, deepening a little bit as I have been doing, especially the romance books and stuff, because those require you to spend more time in your chest voice, your deeper register a lot of times. And so that's one of the primary differences, is that they do tend to be much more dynamic. With romance books, it's it's a lot more subtle. It's a lot more intimate. So you don't have to spend quite as much time making, the voices so wildly different, but they both have their own kind of momentum. One's just much more of a sort of a reactive momentum. And then I would say with romance, it tends to be a lot more simmering and psychological and internal and nuanced most of the time. Sometimes you do have characters that are a bit more brazen and a bit more reactive, but I really enjoy the sort of the psychological aspect of romance books.
Yeah, what makes a character the way that he is and what makes him say certain things and do certain things. Yeah. It's the authors can do a really good job. And I know that there's been a lot of changes in within the audiobook industry. With before, authors were not involved a lot in the production of the audiobooks. Now they are, so they're giving you guys more information in the beginning of the process versus you having to sit there and read the entire freaking book to realize that he has an Irish accent on page 300.
Right.
Yeah, you're going, damn it.
Absolutely. And I think, the great news is that a lot of these publishers and production companies have been enormously helpful in sort of getting that information ahead of time. I mean, just to kind of like keep in the back of our heads as we're moving through it. We of course like read all the books that we're prepping, but every so often that piece of information, he said in his Irish brogue or something, we may have just not registered that if we're reading through, and it happens every so often where there's like one word, which is a pretty important word, but sometimes we just sort of accidentally stepped over it, and we don't realize until a little bit farther in. And I sort of learned that very early on. So, I try to take extreme care with trying to make sure that I have all of the, details that affect your performance in particular,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Things that are sort of very clearly laid out. But, a lot of these teammates with the production companies and publishers are enormously helpful with that kind of stuff. So I haven't really run into
Good.
that
Yeah.
as much,
Yeah. And sometimes I know it happens in the opposite point of view, where it's her point of view and the conversation happens. And that's when the information of, and he said in his Irish brogue, who does he think he is?
Yeah.
In that, talking to me, and that he thinks he's that sexy. And then so you guys don't get that part so much unless you're having to read the whole book. So yeah, it's good that you guys are getting more info in the upfront of it.
Yeah,
And that the
absolutely.
narrators, do you work with your co-narrators and collect that kind of information from each other? I'm like, so hey, how deep are you really going with that voice?
Yes. Yeah. The vast majority of the time we and everybody's a little bit different. Sometimes sometimes we get together and do like a Zoom session where we talk about everything. Other times, we're emailing back and forth, and we'll send like files of examples of our take on the character, certain qualities that we had decided upon, and we'll sort of refine it a little bit more, sort of come to an agreement on how we want to do it. And sometimes that's about, that's about it. It's just sending stuff back and forth. And it really just sort of depends, right? There's dual narration where you're doing your own chapters, even though you're also voicing the other character as well in your chapters. And then it's funny because duet narration has somewhat evolved a little bit, because originally, and I can really only speak for my experience with like Pink Flamingo, for instance, where at first we were doing it where we were recording it contemporaneously, and then we switched to doing it separately and sort of I guess putting the necessary pauses in between where the other person's lines would be and stuff, and imagining it a little bit. And honestly, I've never really struggled with either one. I will say it was quite a bit of fun, and I know other people, other companies still do this as well, where we do the Zoom sessions and stuff like that. But I can completely understand how, from a flexibility standpoint, it can make it a bit easier for people to just sort of record on their own schedules. I'm totally okay with either one.
That's good.
They're great fun.
Yeah. No, it's duets it has become a favorite of mine, simply because there's a bit more, especially when with romance, when there is that moment of banter or and it's a little hard to interrupt yourself when you're when you're doing all the voices in the chapter, versus it's a little bit more symbiotic, I think, when it's the two of you going at each other and as the characters. It's always fun more that way. But yeah, it's been interesting now. I know the conversation has been, well, Zoom or not to Zoom. Right. When it comes to duet narration. And
or
for
whichever platform, take your pick. Yeah,
there are a couple of different ones too, that are more industry used.
Like I've really enjoyed where I'm sure this is still going on, but there was a Discord for a while there that basically narrators would openly narrate what they're working on, so long as they had gotten the permission to and everything. And you can follow along and just sort of be a fly on the wall of what's actually behind the scenes and how that whole process goes.
Yes.
Even Shore, I think she started that Discord. The name of the Discord eludes me at the moment.
But there's two different Discord. I'm trying to find the right verbiage, because it's almost like each platforms has different verbiage for what they're
Yeah.
categorized.
Right.
We have the clubhouse, and then there's different clubs, but in Discord, I think it's almost like different channels, Discord channels. And so I think there's two, one specifically for romance and one specifically for audiobooks. And then there's a subcategory within that audiobook one that's for romance. So there's two different ones. I have it somewhere. I can put it in the notes for those that are listening, because it is fun to get to watch you guys kind of go through that process. And and how you guys switch between the characters' voices like so quickly, and I'm like, whoa, dude, wow.
Yeah. And to further entice your audience there, I know that some narrators are even comfortable with engaging with the audience and asking them, what do you suppose I should how should I handle this character in this instance? Like, should I use a little bit of like more of this accent, or do you think I should, do you think the character would be a little bit more taken aback or something? And they make it a bit more interactive. And I think that's a really fun idea. Obviously, you kind of have to balance it out with what you think really works.
Yeah.
But that's a fun little sort of wrinkle in the experience of not just eventually getting to hear the final product, but perhaps even being a part of the product in that regard, having had a, sort of a small hand in a little tidbit of how the production actually played out.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that the romance community loves to do, and the authors have picked up on that, is being part of the process, not only as the end user consumer, but also the authors will ask, hey, who are your top narrators? And sometimes the same four people come up, and other times we're like, well, who are your new ones? And then like, that's how your name came up in conversation with me, was they're like, oh, you guys got to cast this guy named Michael Gallagher. And I'm like, who? And I'm like writing the name down. And, and there's a couple other ones, and I'm going, okay, because we kind of have a type with narrators, and because we know that they do such a good job, we're not going to get disappointed. And when there's money involved in credits and stuff like that, and we know we're going to get a good story, we kind of stick to the same individuals. But I like branching out. I like discovering the newer voices or those up and coming ones, and being part of that process of like, you guys got to listen to Michael, and things like that.
I'm honored.
Yeah. No, it's because there's a lot of you guys, and there's something for everybody, and what you guys bring to the table is different. And I know sometimes, again, it can be a little scary, going to a new author and a new narrator, and we're going, I only got so many hours in my day, and I want to get a good story. And you go, do you, do not? And I'm like, yeah, it's Michael, do it. So,
Wow.
Yeah, it's just a fun thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's really great to hear it. Cause I was thinking that to myself when I got your email. I was like, how did she find me? I was in witness protection. No, no, I'm safe, everybody.
Yeah, no,
but I was just like taken aback. I was like, I've never been asked to do something like this. I'm tickled. And so this has been, great. Not that it's ending. I'm just saying I was
going to be like, where are you going?
Experience. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's the community. We talk about what we like, what we don't like, what is it about the voice? And, there's a lot of groups out there where, the conversation of, oh my God, it got so hot and heavy, and when he says that particular word, it's like, oh, yummy, and parts tingle and blah, blah, blah. But there's also a group of that we really want the plot development. We want the characters to grow from page one to page end. And what does the narrator bring to add that oomph to an already good book? And that's kind of conversation. And authors are realizing that. And that's who they're asking, well, who are these up and coming narrators, or who was someone that was like wowed by it, And so your name came up by a couple of listeners. So I'm adding these names and stuff. And then I did the Google, because Audible and Google is your friends. And I'm going, holy crap, Michael's done a lot of like all over the place. And then I listened to him like, oh yeah, and he sounds yummy. Yay.
Oh man, the funny thing is that I'll speak for myself. I spend so much time doing this stuff on my own and not, I guess unlike being an actor on the stage where you get immediate feedback, a lot of this time is spent making this stuff for you guys and gals. And we don't really have a whole lot of contact with you in many regards. And it's exciting whenever there are more opportunities to be able to do that, because I do feel like at some point, you do really want to know and feel like what you're putting together is what people are really enjoying.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's been primarily in the last year or so that I've sort of gotten my first bits and pieces of feedback from audience members in particular. Like I just got a message that was the sweetest message from a listener, a fan, just the other day. And it just means the world, really,
Mm-hmm.
to know that people are not just enjoying them, but it's really it's making their day,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, there's more to it too, because there's a lot of listeners that are going through tough times. Either they've been sick and they're like, I had a friend who her son was in chemotherapy. So she was constantly having to be in the hospital, and the audiobooks was helping her pass the time and giving her that kind of grounding in between the medical noises, having to have these really hard conversations with doctors and family members and all this other stuff. And to be able to reach out to you guys and say, thank you. It's really big on us to be able to do that. But also it's, again, you guys are so alone, and you have a project, you get cast, you do it, you're done, bye, next. And you don't know what comes after that, right? Or how we feel or perceive how your performance was. So it's kind of, we love the fact that you guys are being more active on social media to be able to have that bits of connections with you guys.
Yeah.
So if you haven't been, you need to get more on there, dude.
This is my concession, is that I really do need to be more active on social media. It's funny because like that was my intention originally when I was starting out. And then when things really took off, I got so swamped that I failed spectacularly to be able to work in my social media strategy. And that's something that I'm actually in the thick of trying to work on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all sort of like, you want to spend time putting your best foot forward, and and you want to make things look just right. And so you're kind of like digging through your mind palace of like how exactly you want to put it together and everything. And sometimes it can be a little exhausting, but sometimes you just gotta do it. My dad says, sometimes when you wait at the edge of the water and you're looking at a boat to see if, it's seaworthy, and you're kind of like measuring it, you're looking at it, sometimes you spend too much time and eventually the boat goes away. It actually is, once it's on the water, it's too late. So sometimes you just got to get on the boat.
Yeah. And it's intimidating. Like, why would anybody want to know what I'm posting or listening to and stuff like that? And people have that, like, why would anybody want to know what I'm doing? Imposter syndrome situation going. And so there's a lot of conversations like I've had with reviewers and bloggers and even some narrators. I'm like, it doesn't have to be perfect. I just show me your booth with the book cover because you got permission to do it. And this way I know to add it to my calendar because you're narrating it. But it's easier said than done.
we all do. We should all just sit together and hold hands, because we all do have this imposter syndrome, right? Oh, yeah. And
absolutely.
we're all thinking the same thing too. We're all sitting here going, I'm the only one who doesn't have my shit together. And everybody else is thinking that, right?
Oh, like absolutely.
I'm the one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're all in that boat, and so we should, celebrate that in a certain respect, and recognize and empathize that we all have those feelings, even the ones that seem to fool us the most, of like, that they do have, their stuff together more than anybody else, and they feel the same way.
Oh yeah. I mean, even I had someone to ask me, do you still get nervous when you talk to your guests? I'm like, hell fuck yeah, I do. I still get better, but you've been doing it for over like 8 years. I'm like, and it doesn't matter. I mean, aside from imposter syndrome, it's, making sure that things are done correctly, that things are recording correctly. And do I have to pull information out of you guys, or are you going to be telling me everything and I'm making sure that you guys are comfortable? There's so many different variables. And
Yes.
it's still nerve-wracking because you guys are also our rock stars. And I'm going, oh my God, I want to be talking to Michael.
Sometimes we get, I'll say right now, sometimes I still get nervous, even just sitting in a booth by myself. Sometimes I get, and that comes from more of like a perfectionist, wanting to do as well as I can and as good by the listeners as I possibly can, and making sure that I'm not just phoning it in and, and yet I'm all by myself. It's not as though there's somebody standing over my shoulder, although that does happen every so often. You do like a directed session or something like that. And the funny thing is I actually find that, I don't know if it's a negative reinforcement thing, but it's sort of like that extra sort of zing, that extra sort of little bit of oomph from having a director there. A lot of times actually makes me perform even better than I would on my own, because I tend to be a little bit more, hard on myself when I'm on my own. Whereas I try to be as cognizant of the director's time. And so, so I just try to pull out, all the stops and keep things moving on. And it gives me that oomph,
Yeah. And there's also there's less second guessing of yourself because they're telling you that's a good job. You did good. And,
exactly.
Versus ourselves, we're like, that sucked. Let me do it again.
Yeah. And you realize, this is one of the things that narrators spend so much time, is they realize that they actually burn a lot of time, being too hard on themselves, when really they've got it. They're doing a good job. Like it's okay, and that's not to say that you shouldn't like just sort of completely throw any kind of criticism out the window, but like, turns out most of the time you're the obstacle in your own way.
Oh yeah.
Not so much what you've been doing. Chances are you've probably been doing a pretty good job,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's one of those things that I've been trying to focus on for myself, and also in conversation with friends and stuff when it comes up, is be kinder to ourselves. Because we talk to ourselves a lot worse than we would ever talk to anybody else about things.
Oh my gosh,
so we need to be nicer to ourselves and things like that.
Yeah. And it's that thing they say where it's like, would you say that to a friend? You think,
no.
oh my gosh, no.
No.
You think, and then you realize how harsh, sometimes you can be to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy. I know that we mentioned it a little bit before with the Irish brogue and the stuff like that, but accents. You do a couple of them. I've heard some of those samples and in the books. What are some of the favorite accents for you to perform?
I found, early on that the sort of Irish and a little bit of Scottish and certain UK accents, that the British Isles, I should say, those are probably the ones that I engage with the most and have some of the most fun with. They're not the ones that I would say I'm quote unquote the best at. The ones that I tend to be a little bit better at are actually some of the Southern accents, Southern US accents, I should say. Just because I spent about 10 years of my life in North Carolina. So I've spent a lot of time with people from the South. So, and sort of some of the distinctions between those, like, the difference between, something like a more of an Appalachian, mountain Southern accent where a lot more of the hard R's, the rhotic R's, as opposed to something like Louisiana, deep South sort of, accent. And then it gets even more distinct with, things like, I don't know, it's harder for me, but Texas has its own sort of little bit of flavor to that as well. And I mean, once you start off by getting sort of the more stereotypical starting points for accents, you say, oh, I can do a Southern accent. And then you ask, well, what does that really mean? Where are you from? Are you from North Carolina, or are you from Florida, or are you from Louisiana? Are you from Alabama? They do have their subtleties,
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
or when you say you can do a British accent, it's like, well, what exactly does that mean? Because a person from Surrey sounds a little bit different from someone from Manchester or Liverpool, or and they can be sort of subdivided. You start off with what most people think of as a proper British accent, which is called RP, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you think of Cockney. Okay, there's the sort of the other counterbalance. But a lot of people sort of get Cockney, which is particularly London metropolitan based, confused with sort of other areas in the UK like Surrey or Manchester or things like that. There have been actually all kinds of great examples that I've pulled from various pop culture, like Game of Thrones. If you ever listen to Game of Thrones, that is a great case study in sort of the whole run of all these different UK accents.
Yep.
And if you just look up the actors and stuff and you see where it is that they're from and you listen to them for long enough, you really start to see the differences. And there is a book, a very large fantasy book, which I can't really talk about in depth right now, that I'm working on right now, that I am pulling on all of that stuff from.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're definitely more forgiving in when it comes down to like when it's like, oh, it's a British hero. Okay. We kind of like lump sum
in America. I think
in America.
True. Yeah.
Yes. But when you go with Southern, we're going, well, wait, is he from Alabama, North Carolina, Southern Louisiana, or Savannah, Georgia?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
They're picky and they will tell you. It's hilarious. And I'm going, I'm from Florida. But I'm mid-Florida, so I don't have that Southern accent.
Right. And to me, I'm like, I don't, does mid-Florida mean something? Like but maybe, very possibly.
Maybe, yeah. It's funny.
And I mean, I think for the most part, the great thing about audiobook, audiences is that they're incredibly forgiving. And for the most part, the great news is that for the most part, they're focused on the right things. Yes, the accents further enrich the storytelling, but they are primarily focused on the story, and the characters and the moments between characters and stuff. I really think that's the core, of what we're trying to do. But the accents are fun, man.
Yeah,
they really are.
Yeah, there's been 2 instances where I've seen it. I think one was a review and another one was a tweet. And the review was, yeah, he didn't sound anything Irish at all. And I'm going, you don't realize that the narrator is actually born and raised in Ireland. It was just it was just slight. And then there's another one. I was like, his British accent was so fake and he's British. I'm like, right.
Well, no. So that brings up a really good point, because what I think a lot of people don't realize is, I think on our side of the pond, as the Brits say, on our side of the pond with Americans, when we think of what accents should be, we often think about the sort of the most pronounced, most exaggerated versions of them.
Yeah.
Whereas in a great deal of the world, it's a whole mix of, accents being broken or them being much more slight. I know all kinds of, people in the UK, or even like some actors you listen to who they are British, but it's much more died down. And that could be from a whole range of things. It could be because they spent a ton of time in the States and it's become more Americanized. It could be that it's really a mix of, various accents because they lived, throughout the UK. And in a way, it kind of feels like, in America, you think, oh, a person from Alabama should sound like this, or a person from North Carolina should sound like this. And the truth is, people have been moving and intermingling and learning, all from around the world and around the country. they're not going to fit stereotypically into that voice profile that you would expect from a particular region. That's not to say that those people don't exist, obviously, but it's much more, the pot has melted together much more over time than one would expect.
And others, sometimes people pick up the accents really well. There was one narrator who that we were arguing, some listeners in a friendly manner, we're going, no, he's not British. Yes, he's British. No, he's not British. Yes, he is, because the accent work is so good. And I'm like, it's really easy. That's fine. Let's just ask. Turns out he's not British. But in some places, like I know that I pick up accents if I'm hanging out with people and talking to them. I'll start in that similar accent. If I visit up north, like I still can't say car. I always say car because I went to Boston that one time and that word just stuck. And then when I visit family in Texas, even though they're from Connecticut, but they've lived in Texas for such a long time, they have that a bit of a southern twang. So if I'm hanging out with them, come day 2, I'm having them like, stop, Viviana. You do not speak with this accent. Stop it. It comes naturally to some people. It's easier than others. Yeah.
And that's what we do when we're with people who we love and respect. We start picking up things from them, right?
Yeah.
And incorporating them because that's how culture spreads. I just think that the funny thing is that the more that happens, it's sometimes difficult to get people to realize that there's more sort of subtleties in accents, which lead people to think that when somebody is using something that's more of a subtle or a blend or something accent, that it's not actually what it is. When it is, but it isn't, right? It's probably more reflective of the world around us now, just not what we thought of, I don't know, many decades ago.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
So on the opposite spectrum, what are some of the accents that you don't jive well with, that just are difficult for you or you just don't like? Are there any?
You know what? Like, okay, so I don't know if it's that, I don't jive well with them, but I think that some of them are a bit more difficult for me. Maybe because I don't know, because it's not as easy to chew on, so to speak, as something like, like a Scottish or an Irish accent or something more subtle, like a Midwest accent.
Oh yeah.
That I know that there are characteristics about it, but sometimes it's sort of like doing what I'm doing right now, but every so often having certain characteristics that come out with certain words. I feel like those kinds of accents that are even more subtle, that only incorporate, certain characteristics at certain times, is a little bit more difficult to keep track of.
Yeah.
Or like when people say, for instance, a California accent, I'm not sure I even know what that means sometimes. Like I can understand if you wanted something exaggerated, like a Valley Girl accent or something, but unless you're going for, surfer dude or something a little bit more died down from that, California to me sounds the same as any other sort of, standard Eastern Seaboard American accent. And so there are things like that I think when the rubber meets the road, it is harder to keep track of that. Whereas there are other, great examples throughout the world who feel more representative of an accent that is much more distinct. So you feel like you can latch onto it a little bit more. There's all kinds of, shades of subtlety and non-subtlety. And I find that, or for instance, if somebody says, well, this is my favorite. They grew up in the UK, but they've lived in the States for 15 years, but their mother is Jamaican. And you're like, all right, so let's see what we can do with that. It doesn't happen a whole, ton. I would say that the most common thing is that authors want to see some kind of an accent, but more subtle, more
Yeah.
died down, right?
Yeah.
Like the thing I just mentioned. They're from the they were born in the UK and they were there when they were a kid, but they've been in the States for a long time. So it might come out a little bit, or when they're excited or
Yes.
angry, right?
Yes. That's for sure.
Which also has its degree of, all right, well, how much do we want to dial in or dial out? How much of that accent comes through. And you just got to be a little bit judicious with that. So yeah, like Midwest. I'm not sure that I've really nailed like really any kind of Spanish accent. Those are a little bit harder for me. I would say generally accents that are outside of the Anglosphere, those tend to be they tend to be ones that pop up less often. But ones that I do enjoy the opportunity of learning more about that. And there are certain there are Facebook groups and stuff like that that are dedicated to this practicing with one another with those kinds of accents. But those, outside of the Anglosphere, those are a little bit more challenging and also kind of make me nervous because I don't want to do them, wrong. I don't want to, offend anybody, and I want to make sure that I'm at least doing it justice. And that's why a lot of times we tend to sort of keep it very died down if they have some kind of small part in our books, because we don't want to sort of overstep a lot of times.
That is true. Yeah. You want to, accurately represent the character and not make it into a caricature.
Right, not a character. Exactly.
Yeah, and it can be difficult. But yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point about how sometimes our accents come out more so when we're in heightened state of emotional upsets. Because I will switch more to Spanish when I get upset, and then the Argentinian accent comes out.
Right.
More, yeah, and it's just and they're like, "Whoa," and I'm like, "What? I was pissed."
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm the same way. Like I kind of triangulated my way here to Los Angeles because though I spent 10 years in North Carolina, I'm originally from New England. All my family's from Massachusetts and Rhode Island. I was born in Rhode Island. And so, it's really, again, like you said, the times in which I'm excited or frustrated or something that, that I'll start to sound a little bit more like my family saying, Johnny, you got to lay down the cards. You got to lay down the fucking cards, Johnny. What are you going to do? So,
yep.
Yeah. But it's great. I'm always excited to get to do any accent, even if I'm, not super practiced at it. That gives me an opportunity to learn more about it.
Yeah. Especially if you're a learner. It seems like you're a learner.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Forever.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Cool. So with romance, I like to say it's almost like an umbrella term with all the subgenres underneath it: paranormal, fantasy, contemporary, mafia, young adult, and all that fun stuff. Is there a genre that you have not worked in that you'd like to work in?
Just recently, I've sort of been strategizing about areas that I've wanted to work more in, and I think I'd like to work more, and I've gotten a couple opportunities recently to do more in sci-fi and fantasy. I'm a nerd. I love sci-fi and fantasy. I love new worlds, new alien races or new magics. I really do enjoy that that entire realm, and I also love to explore just like the what ifs. So that I wanted to explore. It's funny, I had an interest in thriller, but I also realized that a lot of thriller is maybe not what I thought of when it came to thriller, because thriller, I think, actually more so means things like crime drama.
Yeah.
And that I just did an audition for a crime drama, and I sort of realized, I really enjoy the momentum of it and the energy of it, but at the same time, it can also be kind of dense. A lot of times there can be a lot of terminology and things that I have that I don't really know because I don't watch, for instance, or read a lot of crime drama. So it can be a little bit of a stumbling block when there's a kind of a, Aaron Sorkin, walk and talk energy going on where people are just, throwing all kinds of terms that I've just never, heard of or read or seen before. And so, it is a lot of fun. It sort of slows me down a little bit. So it's sort of one of those areas that I'd have to spend more time with and getting more comfortable with, but it is still very cool. Horror has always been an area that I want to work more in. I always love, I've always loved the nervous energy of horror. When it comes to listening to audiobooks, it's kind of like one of the more just tintillating kinds of experiences of listening to. I think most of the time when I've heard people tell me these great stories when I was a kid, it was in the format of horror and just waiting with bated breath to hear what was going to happen next. Was really great. And so that's something that would be pretty cool, I think.
Nice. Yeah. There are so many things out there, even outside of the umbrella of romance, but even within that umbrella, there are a lot of authors that have said, I would love to do like a horror romance. I'm like, go for it, girl. And then they'll have the cozy mysteries, which are kind of like what you would think a thriller is more like, but it's a dun 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 kind of who's-done-it, but not so into the terminology. Which is, I think, a lot of listeners like as well, because there's the like, and also like they'll meet cutes and all that fun stuff in contemporary. That there's so many different availability. I think it's a good word, kind of way to say it, when it comes down to these genres. And there's some that aren't even being invented because they're mixing. It used to be paranormal was one thing and sci-fi was one, and fantasy was another. And now you're like paranormal, sci-fi, romance.
No, they're all sort of starting to blend together. And also just the sort of, I thought to myself one day, I was like, when do you start, when you're doing a romance, when do you stop calling it a romance and start calling it erotica? Because I imagine that a lot of books out there that are erotica, or at least seem like erotica, I imagine that most of those authors would refer to themselves as romance authors, right? Or that they would refer to the book as a romance. Because I think that a lot of them want to emphasize the fact that it is a story and stuff, but are there, you know what I mean? Like when does one call it a romance or erotica, or has it become sort of the same thing? People
still get the two mixed up. There's a difference between erotic romance and erotica. And so usually the conversation becomes, is there a story and a plot that's driving the characters that has romance, and it's just very hot and steamy? And they, I like as TikTok likes to say, spicy. That then becomes an erotic romance. Erotica, the sex is driving everything.
Yeah, that's what I imagined it to be. I just sort of, I wondered, like, have there been authors who have been sort of, depending on how heavily they lean into, the sex and the steamy scenes and stuff, could the audience say, oh, that's erotica? And they go, no, it's erotic, it's erotic romance. And,
it's an ongoing debate. Amazon loves to mess with the authors that way too. They've been, Amazon has flagged books as erotica, and they're like, and the authors are like, hell no, because ranking is different, and books can get banned. And then there's some that are like proud that their book got banned because it was an erotica, and then they get on audio and they're like, hey, now you're gonna hear it, baby.
Wow.
That's
awesome.
You run the gamut. You have the complete spectrum of reactions, and but the listeners like about everything. I want to say there's some that are more into the actions and more into the steaminess, and there's some that are fine with what they call slow burns, when it's a lot less, like half the book has gone by and they just kissed or something, and so there's no sex up until later. So there's again the gamut as to what the audience is, and there's something for everybody, from slow burns to hey, I just met you and we're going to go into the bathroom and have it fun, to fade to black, to completely open doors and they tell you everything, nothing to the imagination, to, hey, I did not realize I had that kink. Thanks.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, in the experience of, I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about narrating romance over time because, it's not as though I read a whole lot of romance to begin with.
Yeah.
So I was sort of like, what's the experience going to be like narrating a lot of it? And I tell you what, I have come to love reading books that make me blush. I really do. I love it. Yeah. And there's a lot more, in terms of how people are putting together the various components of how to tell, these stories than I would have expected. There's been a lot of surprises over the, I'd say, almost 2 years now of doing romances, and that's been thrilling. So many talented people writing these stories. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that we as the listeners tend to go like, do they still blush like after how many books? Or of course, I wonder if they still get excited. Like, do they get turned on to? And
For
I'm like,
what it's worth, we all do.
yeah. I'm like, we're
do.
human beings. It's a little hard not to.
Absolutely. I find myself all the time in various moments. I'm reading out a sentence and then I like straight up like stop and I'm like, oh my God. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's and some of us readers will be like, we highlight and we go to our partner, read it, memorize it later tonight.
Yes.
So
yeah,
try something new. Why not? Yeah. So it's nice to know that after doing so many books that you guys are still somewhat reacting to what the word is. Yeah. So that's really good. So when it comes down to all these books that you're doing and working, when you're not working, what do you do for fun?
Oh boy. Well, I really do. It's great. The great thing about being in a town like LA is there are various fun things to do. And I've been trying a few different things. Like I just went to the first time I ever went to a comedy club recently. I went to Flappers. And there was a whole bunch of comedians that got up there and did a great job. I love to go. I'm a big foodie. I love to go and check out various restaurants, be they pop up or mainstays. There's an awesome restaurant that we went to. We've gone a couple times now. Me and my girlfriend. There's this place called Beetle House, and it's completely, I don't know if I would call it like Halloween themed, but basically you go in and they sort of bring you in the back as though it were like a speakeasy. And it's the walls and everything in the menu. They're all like, we'll go with Halloween themed for now. It's like Tim Burton and all these different sort of spooky and horror movie cultural elements that have been weaved into everything. And the food is phenomenal. And it's great because it's kind of like dinner theater. Basically, they have people who dress up and they come out and they're dressed like various characters like Oogie Boogie, and, the Queen of Hearts, Edward Scissorhands. And they sort of, they host it, but they also, come out with like a song or a show tune or something, and they sing it while you're having, this great filet mignon or something. And it's just a ton of fun. And, anytime that somebody comes into LA, I recommend it because it's a really good experience. So stuff like that. Yeah. And, I don't know, just any excuse to, in between like my breaks and stuff, I'll go out. I live in this tiny little cul-de-sac, just up in the Hollywood Dell, and my neighbor's dog will always be sort of sitting out there by the fence, and she's learned that I'm the one who kicks the ball the best, because I use my little flip-flop and I sort of curve it under and I get really high air. So every time I'm out there, but somebody else wants to throw the ball around, she like steals it from them and tries to give it to me because she's like, no, you don't understand. He's the one who knows how to kick the ball right. So
this is the human we like.
yeah. So Ella, love her.
That's
fun. All kinds of joy in between my breaks and stuff. And also during my breaks, love to play me some Xbox Game Pass just to wind down and play some games and hang out. I love to travel when I can. I've done more traveling in this past year that I have in quite a while. I've been doing a lot of domestic travel. I was actually supposed to go to Ireland during the summer, but a couple things kind of got in the way of that. So we're probably going to try and do that some other time. But I'm so excited to eventually go. I got my passport for like the first time. I'd never gotten a passport before, and it was actually, with the exception of going to the post office for like 3 hours, it actually all came in a fairly speedy time. So
that's good.
I was pretty happy about that.
Do not let that expire, whatever you do.
I know.
Oh God, that's the bane of my existence. I let mine expire.
But hey, it's every 10 years. So you're like, all right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I hope that you get to across the pond soon, so you can have that. It's on my list of things to do too, but yeah, we'll get there. In the meantime, I'll do more state stuff.
Yeah. No, me in the meanwhile, I'll be in the box.
Yeah. Traveling that way. Yeah. What's your favorite word?
Ooh, my favorite word. I haven't thought about this in a long time. Actually, resonance. I really love that word. I think that it just really, it's such a beautiful word that encapsulates anything that really is meaningful to you and that energizes you, and motivates you. Yeah, I really like that word. If there was some kind of a symbol or an icon for resonance, I'd probably make that as a tattoo or something. Because I think it's spoken to a lot of different parts of my life, like my musical part of my life. Music was always a big part of it, and the voice, in general, and just anything that is really meaningful that resonates with you. I just love that word. Yeah,
it's a pretty word. So, what's your favorite curse word?
Ooh. Okay, so it's sort of a multi worded curse word, and I'm so glad that you said that we can curse on this show, because so there's this teacher in high school who was teaching I want to say it was a Shakespeare and literature class, and we were going over the play Romeo and Juliet. And at one point, she's talking about I don't know if you ever read it, in high school or college or anything, but there's this character named Rosalind who, in the beginning, they never actually show Rosalind in the play, but it's basically the girl that broke Romeo's heart, right?
Yep.
And Romeo is talking to, I don't know, I can't remember which one he was talking to, but it might have been Benvolio or something. But he was talking about Rosalind, and she starts talking about Shakespeare. She says, what do you think that Shakespeare is trying to say about Rosalind here in this scene, that she's just some sperm burping road whore, or that she, and I had to grab my mouth because I was about to burst out laughing. I had never heard something strung together like that before, and I was just, wow. I was floored and just amazed. I was like, wow, that's creative and terrifying and gets right in the gut. And I just loved it ever since. I've never heard somebody do that before.
Oh my goodness. Say it again.
Sperm burping road whore.
Oh my
I was like,
God.
wow, that is visceral.
Yeah. I mean, it's descriptive and gives you like where they're at.
Yeah, like
Wow.
that's going for the throat there. I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
reminds, like, a lot of the Spanish curse words sometimes are words that are like, or phrases that are strung together. And that kind of gives you that,
Uh-huh.
oh, when those words are put together, that one's one of those now.
Yeah, well, that's why when I was in high school, there was this translated book. I can't remember which, but we were reading it, and the teacher was actually talking about, like, because they were a Spanish speaker, and they were like, if you guys ever learn Spanish, you really should, and then reread this in Spanish, because the translation doesn't quite capture the enrichment of this word or this string of words, because it
Yeah.
has a slightly different connotation.
Yeah, exactly. It's when certain words individually are bad enough, but when you put them together, you're like,
Oh, yeah,
oh,
that
Huey,
hits.
oh, like back away slowly.
Yeah.
I may have to use that.
Feel free to steal it. I thought it
Yeah.
was fabulous.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned music and having a love for it. So, what song do you have to sing along with no matter where you hear it when it comes on?
Oof. I
Oof.
gotta pick one. Ugh. Oh my gosh. Oh, this is like one of those, like, what's your favorite movie kind of thing, which I would even find easier than this, honestly. Maybe I'll go with something more recent, just to whittle it down a little bit. Oh, you know what's funny? Like, okay, not that this is like the song or my favorite song or anything, but like, it's like an old sort of 80s song, but it's the one where it goes like, I wear my sunglasses at night so I can't. You ever heard that one before?
Yeah, I heard that one. Yeah.
Don't switch the man. Yeah, it's so good. That one's a jam. But I always like listen to it. I'm like, this is such a weird song. I love
Yeah.
weird. I love weird.
Yeah, there's a lot of those, or the ones that when I was growing up and as a teenager and in my early 20s are not considered, and now in the classic station, and that comes up and I'm going, no, that is not classic.
I know, but they're like sort of these one-hit wonders that that people are just like, oh yeah, we'll turn that into a meme.
Yeah, right? the 80s had a lot of one-hit wonders, mainstream specifically, but that was also because there was a lot of underground stuff happening, which is kind of like how it's happening now.
I'll change my answer slightly, only because I just recently went to a John Mayer concert, and I like John Mayer. I think he's very talented, and there are certain songs that I have just always thought are wonderful. I think Why Georgia is a great song. If you haven't listened to it before, it's such a lovely song. That one I'll probably go with. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's good. I was like asking that question because sometimes I'm like, I've never heard of that one, or I'm like, oh, that's a good one, I haven't heard it in a long time, and then I'll play it after we hang up.
Yeah.
But I wear my sunglasses at night. I'm like, why?
I know. Yeah, it's just the one that came to mind because I heard it on the radio the other day, and I was just like, this was a fun little jam.
It was, yeah. It's like, again, you're in the car, or you're in the supermarket nowadays. If something comes up and you're like jamming, and I'm like, no, I'm in public, I can't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So one of the other things we'd love to do here with our guest is play a game of getting to know you with 2 truths and a lie. Where I ask you to tell me 3 things about yourself. Obviously 2 are going to be true and 1's going to be a lie, and we have to figure out which is the lie. And I always say we because I really hope the listeners are playing along with me. Otherwise it's lonely.
I'm excited because I thought very carefully about this, and I have some interesting answers for you, and I'm very curious to see if you get it.
Okay, well, I'm ready when you are.
Okay. So 2 truths and a lie, right?
Yep.
Number 1, option number one, door number one. I went snorkeling for the first time when I was 5 years old in Jamaica. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Went snorkeling for the first time when I was 5 years old in Jamaica. Number two, when I was 3, I almost permanently lost a chunk of my hair when I was playing with an electric drill.
Oh my God.
Okay. And then number 3, my mother made me drink soy milk most of my childhood, including in my cereal, which is a very interesting experience. So, yeah. So,
Oh boy.
yeah, I try to keep them specific just to see.
Yeah, see, this is where the details, it's always in the details. And people are like, well, how do you try to figure it out? And I'm like, well, it could be that if they give you way too much specifics, snorkeling first time in Jamaica when he was 5 years old, those are very specific. I'm like going, that might be a lie. But all yours are, dang it.
I know. Well, this is why I was like, well, I know if I give one that's like really general, but then I give one that's really, really specific, that could lead them to think, oh, well, because that one's super specific, that must be, the one. So I try to keep them all a little bit more specific.
Yeah, exactly. And then also, again, very detailed, 3 years old, almost lost based off of, oh yeah, my goodness, if both things were happening, your parents must have had a fun time with you as an infant. And then soy milk, even in your cereal. Oof. Okay. I want to say the lie is the almost losing a chunk of your hair.
No, it's not.
That's the lie. Oh my God.
Okay. So
dude.
Brief explanation. So I'm going to be honest. The one that is the lie is sort of a lie only by by a single point. And here's why. The lie was I went snorkeling for the first time when I was 5 years old in Jamaica.
Yeah.
The lie part of that is I didn't go snorkeling because my parents, basically said because I was 5 that I was too young and that they were worried something might happen in the process of me snorkeling and that would make a mess of things. So they ended up going snorkeling on their own. But I was 5 years old and I was in Jamaica. And that's the only time that I was ever out of the country. I did not need a passport at that point. And that was, what was it like? Yeah. Because that would be long time ago now.
Eons ago.
Yeah, eons ago. I do have this distinct memory though of like basically this thunderstorm, but it wasn't even like thunder, and it was just thunder. It was no like rain or anything. And like the lightning just dancing across the sky, and it was warm out. It was just sort of a mix of things that I'd never experienced before that I was like, wow, I can't believe, like it was in the middle of the night, the curtains are flowing and I'm watching out and it's just gorgeous.
So we get those here.
Yeah. And wait, so where are you based?
I'm in Orlando, Florida.
You're in Orlando. Okay,
yeah.
cool.
And I grew up in Miami, so close to the beach. So we do have in Florida those silent storms where you sometimes either you just hear it and you have no idea where it's coming from, or very visual where you see the lightning, but you hear nothing.
Right.
And you're looking pretty, I'm gonna go indoors now, but pretty.
yeah, exactly. When I was 3, I did pick up a drill and I was fiddling with it. I was pressing on the gun part, and it just sort of the drill got too close to my hair and it just went and grabbed a huge chunk of it. And it ended up ripping out a huge chunk of my hair. And when they brought me to the emergency room, they said, we don't think that he's ever going to grow hair there again because it's ripped out at the roots. Thankfully, they were wrong. And I still have a very, full head of hair. But it very probably could have happened. And then, yes, my mother is a health nut and she was a big soy milk drinker. And so we drank soy milk we didn't have like whole milk or anything in the house. So whenever we wanted cereal, it had to be with soy milk. Yeah.
I remember going from whole milk growing up, and then my dad deciding that he wants to do like dieting and healthier eating and going into like 2% milk and then the 1%, and we're going, this is just water with some food dye.
Yeah.
And now I'm just like not even playing with it. I do whole milk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and I think since then my mother somewhat mellowed out about that kind of stuff. But I'm
Wait
okay
until
on
you
soy
have
milk
kids.
Oh my
And she,
gosh.
as grandparents, they'll give the kid the cookie before they even have the dinner, and you're going, whoa, wow.
Right. No, I think I think my mother would be happy to like spoil any children that if I ever had children that, she'd be like, oh no, I'm going to ruin these
Yeah.
children. It's going to be great.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as they get the grandparent title, it's like all the stuff that they did with you kind of goes out the window. And it's like they just want the child to be happy. And I'm like, but you did not let us have cookies before dinner ever.
Yeah.
But look at them. Like, stop. It's like, let them have the cookie. And I'm like, no, they need to finish dinner first. Viviana. I'm like, geez, Louise. And then my niece is looking at me like, ha, 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 ha.
That's when you're like, you are using this, aren't you?
Yes. She's like, thank you for the cookie, Grandma. And I'm like, sooner or later she's leaving.
Kids, they're clever.
Oh yeah, they are. Yeah. I mean, like, except for when they get a drill in their hands.
Yes, less clever.
Yes,
I agree with that.
But at 3 years old, it's a little bit more forgivable. Yeah. I should have gone with my gut. I kind of was thinking it's the snorkeling. It was way too detailed. But good job.
Good. Excellent. A valiant effort, I will say.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before we go, can you tell us what you're currently working on and what's coming up next for you that you can share?
Absolutely. So, I have one book, Pacific Prep #3, which is Beyond Vengeance. By R.A. Smith. That's coming out in April 19th, published by Podium Audio, or produced by Podium Audio, I should say. And that's the third in the series. It is a dark, new adult, reverse harem bully romance.
Wow.
That's a really long genre, I guess you could say. And it's centered around 4 hot guys who rule Pacific Prep. It's an elite academy for the rich and powerful. And one girl with a dark past and a new identity, Hadley Parker, who defies the school norms at every turn. So without giving too much away, she's basically she has this very interesting past that she's trying to hide from people, and it actually relates to the parents of the 4 hot guys who kind of rule over this academy, and they all have very distinct personalities, but they always try to work as one. And there's this really interesting sort of tradition in the school where I think it's like every week or so, they each choose a new girl to kind of be, on their arm, as it were. And at one point, Hadley sort of messes that whole process up when they all go for her in one way or another. So it's very smartly written. It's very witty. It's very snarky. I had a lot of fun. So that's the third one, and that should be coming out April 19th. That's gonna be good. And then another one, which is, I'm kind of cheating here a little bit, but the box sets 1 through 3, and then 3 through 6 for Diary of an 8-Bit Warrior by Cube Kid is going to be releasing. I actually don't have the release date specifically, but I know it's going to be in the next, I want to say 2 weeks or so. And that follows a young Minecraft villager named Runt, and he wants to become a warrior at the Minecraftia school, where he brews potions and fights Endermen and fights mobs, finds allies in unusual places, and more. So we have to, if you have some, I don't know what the typical makeup of your audiences, but if they have kids, this one's a lot of fun. If they really enjoy Minecraft, there's a ton of different characters, all kinds of different challenges, tons of references to things that they would know about if they've played enough Minecraft. Lots of comedy, lots of action. I had a ton of fun working on this series. And there's also a spin-off series called Tales of an 8-Bit Kitten, which is about this kitten who sort of gets morphed into this powerful blue ocelot-like creature who makes friends with all these different monsters, which is not really something that you saw in the main series. So whole different kinds of characters get introduced in that one. So, if you have a younger audience as well, I definitely recommend them to check it out.
Cool. Yeah, I was looking at the covers. I had friends that have kids that play Minecraft, and I was like, okay, they're blocks, and they're like, no, but dude, you get to create these worlds, and I'm like, sure, have fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah. It was what's called a voxel styled game, and it's really kind of one of the big first main games where it's kind of like the new Legos, right?
Yes.
You really get to create your whole different kind of world, and people have created the most amazing things.
I've seen some of them
in Minecraft.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, they did that. I'm like using blocks, and then I remember, I used to play Legos, but it's different when it's virtual versus in your hands. So I'm amazed. Yeah. Like I said, I know my niece was into it too, my kid too. So it's like, wow, okay, have fun, guys. But it's good that they come up with a book that is interesting for the younger folks to be reading this way.
Yeah. And definitely it intersects with the ever, exploding world of video games, which, seems to be, connecting with all kinds of other areas of entertainment, right? We're starting to see a lot more movies and TV shows that are actually based on video games and stuff.
No, for sure.
So, and this is one more realm, audiobooks, where this is coming into play.
Yeah. And a lot of people have discovered the video games because they've read the book, or the vice versa. They've played the video games not knowing there was a book, and then they go back and read the book. So it's kind of really cool how it's like the circle of continuance. It was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, like The Witcher was one of them. Like, I did not know that was a video game. I'm like, no, I did not know it was a book. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
research.
I played the games. I've heard great things about the show too. In fact, it's funny, if I remember correctly. Who is the guy who plays Geralt of Rivia? He
this
plays
guy,
Superman.
Yeah, Henry Cavill, I think is his
Henry
name.
Cavill.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why the show came to be is Henry Cavill, from my understanding, is he's a huge nerd.
Yeah,
and he played the games, and he was like, this is one of my dream roles, and so they started exploring that.
Yep.
And that's part of the reason why it came to fruition.
Yeah,
which
about manifesting, right? Yeah.
He
read the books too, so he knows where this is going, and so it was an interesting, like, wow, okay, good, wow, okay, because a lot of times we think that they're like, oh, they're these movie actors, and he happens to be hot. He's not gonna play video games. No, he's a big nerd.
Oh my gosh,
which is awesome.
I saw a video where he was like excited to show people that he was building a gaming PC. He was like, check this out, guys. And I was like, oh man, you are a huge nerd.
Yeah.
But it's great.
Yeah. So, I think the meme was, and he's giving the rest of us guys some hope.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. While looking like Henry Cavill. But yes, I agree.
Yeah. There's always something, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But no, these books sound really good. I'm going to be adding that Beyond Vengeance to my to be read list when it comes out on the 19th.
Great series. Yeah. Definitely check it out.
Yeah. I think it also, I appreciate you taking the time to actually tell us about the book, because sometimes when we read the blurb or we hear it's a young, it's like a new adult or high schooling bully, and you're like, not my game. But the way that you described it, I was like, ooh, intrigued I am.
Yeah. No, I definitely want to give you something, I always like to bring up a little bit of the things that like resonated with me. See, so there's that
that's
word.
A word.
because those, I'm not going to say those are the things that could resonate with people, but it is one of the things that, if you trust me, not that anybody, knows me too personally, but like, if you've ever enjoyed listening to some of the stuff in the past and, are willing to listen to me vouch, it is a great series. And it's got certain parts of things in there that I haven't really seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And handles it with such wit too. The writing in and of itself is a lot of fun. I always, boy, is that a joy when you're a narrator and you get exciting writing, the way it's written. But I did think to myself, like, there could be a funny, I thought to myself, it would be fun to like get authors together and do sort of like a 10 commandments of what the romance book must have, and listing out the things that you see most often, because it can be a bit of a hoot sometimes when you see certain things pop up now and then,
For sure. I will say that they're definitely one that everybody will agree, if it's for it to be considered romance, it has to have a happily ever after. Yeah. That's a big conversation. Sometimes that comes up every so often. There'll be almost like a wave or a circle that, cycle. And then does it really could it happily for right now work? And we're like, well, technically then that's not romance, but people have gotten more
drama.
Flexible. Yeah. People have gotten more flexible with some things, but others are like, they will not waver. They're like, it must, and it will only be a romance if. I'm like, got it. Okay, good to know.
Well, I thought about that. Yeah, I thought about that more carefully. I was like, okay, so why does it need to have a happily ever after? And I think it's because a big part of what, makes it a romance, or at least sort of what the feeling is about wanting to read a romance, is you kind of want to be comforted and to know. I think there actually is something about at least the formula of having a happily ever after that people, they don't get tired of that. They're actually very comfortable with that. That's a thing that they look forward to.
Yeah, they know that's going to happen regardless if it's aliens, cowboys,
right,
firefighters, high school drama, reverse harem or not. Yes, there's going to be at least a happily ever after.
Yeah, or at very least, they know that conflict is going to come.
Yes.
Right? They know that there's going to be a journey. There's going to be things that people are going to have to overcome. But with romance in particular, to know that things are going to end in the right way, that love will prevail, is, I think, what makes the promise of what a romance is, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's what we look forward to, is like, how is it going to end? We know it's going to be happily ever after, but it's how. And again, it's that journey that the authors take us in, with all the twists and the turns and the ups and the downs, whether it's an alien or a high fantasy, and magic wielding fairies, or fill in the blank. So it's always fun. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for taking the time to hang out with me today. It's been so much fun, a pleasure getting to know you.
It has been my absolute joy. Once again, I really, really appreciate it. And I'm so excited to see you at Allure too.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll definitely be fun. If you're not following him on social media, his links will be included in our post over at Viviana Enchantress of Books. You guys do not have to go hunting for them. And he'll be around probably a lot more, going on forward. A little bit here, a little bit there, dive more into social media. So you could be able to connect with him there. And until next time, happy listenings. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our Audiobook Lovin Podcast Patreon. Special thanks to Nixley Zenner, Carol Liebner, Line Black Peterson, Brittany Robinette Leiter, Don Darch, Michelle Bastard, Nancy Billows. The Audiobook Lovin Podcast has special Patreon access levels. Join today to receive benefits including early access to episodes, shout-outs, special exclusive content, and much more. Support the podcast by becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/audiobooklovin. We thank you for your support.
Thank you for joining us on the Audiobook Lovin Podcast, hosted by Viviana, Enchantress of Books. For links and more information discussed in today's episode, previous podcasts, or the Audiobook Lovin Series, please visit our website, vivianaenchantressofbooks.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a positive review wherever you listen to our podcast. Until next time, happy listening.